You know, experimentation, in my honest opinion, is a really important aspect when it comes to development because failures also means that you actually learn more from it. But at the same time, if you manage to find a right combination for experimentation that you are working on, it usually is the best result you can find. Take fusion cuisine for example. People take years to actually research and try to find the right combination on certain dishes to make sure that not only the flavor works, but also not to offend either of the tradition as a greatest form of respect. Unfortunately though, a brand new right line for Radical Monasterio, Flam-G, is not one of those. It easily is one of those situations where Bushido development team was on a drinking night and they thought it would be funny if Michu and Shamao had a one-night stand. Even the right line boss unit herself was confused why Bushido decided to give her that kind of skill. But how bad the skill could be? Well, that is why I'm here today to explain all about Flam-G and whether is it good or is it bad. As usual, we are starting off with the right line, and what the hell is going on here? I mean, the Bushido has been on streak of trying to replicate certain female characters in different anime medias, and this one for some reason is no exception, as we're starting off with Flam-G, Amamiya Kokoro, I mean Beauclair, who is a starter of this deck. Normally, I'm not saying much about starter because they are more or less do the same thing, but she is gonna be a really important card later on in this deck playstyle, so I'm introducing her early on. Moving on into grade 1, we have Hayasaka, I mean Flam-G, Jonna, and Jonna has 2 skills. When brought upon by grade 2 Flam-G Vanguard, choose Beauclair from your soul, call that card and discard to Regard Circle, and put them into your soul at the end of turn. Early game brush is actually nice and all, but personally for me, you're gonna be using her most of the time for her second skill, where at the end of the battle this unit attack, if your Vanguard is Beauclair, retire this unit and counter charge 1. And you might notice some problem here. Well, for one, early rush is nice but not necessary, and 2, you need Beauclair as a Vanguard for her skill to trigger. So how this deck gonna do it? Well, that's what the grade 3 does, but we're gonna get to the grade 2 first before we get to the grade 3. As we have run I mean Welt with a V, as she also has 2 effects. When brought upon by grade 3 Flam-G Vanguard, if your soul has Flam-G Beauclair, draw 2 cards, choose a card from your hand and put it on the bottom of the deck. And then at the end of the battle, this unit attack, if your Vanguard is Beauclair once again, so last one, retire this unit, choose one of your opponent's Vanguard and retire it. It is rare to see a really cool deck that actually retires, which is nice and all. It's a little bit unexpected coming from a nation that normally don't retire. But same with Jonna, I feel Welt on right skill are kind of useless because all of these things can be fixed with really star right line.
Emotional damage!
Unfortunately, this deck is one of those decks that you're gonna be needing really star right line to generate a lot of early game soul because of the way the grade 3 works and how much soul you're gonna be needing for this deck in general. As we move into the grade 3, and that is Flam-G Roya. Roya, I kind of have an idea who she is based on, but I can't really catch the tail on who she is. But yeah, anyway, let's move on to her skills, and she has 2 skills. And the first skill is the reason why I'm saying you're gonna be using soul a lot, and that is act once per turn, so blast 1, search your deck and soul for up to 1 grade 2 or less card with Flam-G in its name, call them to Regard Circle. If you search from a deck, shuffle it. This doesn't mean much at first until you look at the second skill, where at the end of the battle this unit attack, if you have 3 or more units with Flam-G with different card names, counter blast 1, choose a Beauclair in your soul, write it as stand until the end of turn. That unit lose all auto abilities and get 2k until end of turn for each of damage in both players' damage zone. And at the end of that turn, you write Roya from soul or drop as race. So yes, the reason why I'm saying this they're gonna be using a lot of soul is because of the fact that all of the Flam-G rearguards retire themselves. You're gonna be soul blast at least once per turn to either retire Well for her skill or using Roya's skill to search for Flam-G rearguard. Now that I have flashed out all the card or the skill, you can see a few problems with it. The first off is of course the soul heavy issue. This is why I'm saying Willy Star right line is better, because Willy Star generate at least additional 2 soul for the deck, which allow them to be used immediately on the turn 3 with Roya or in a much later turn where you're gonna need more soul blast. Secondly, the power gaining ability is not bad, especially in the late part of the game, but it's gonna be really bad in the earlier part of the game because most likely you'll be gaining maximum 2 to 6k just because of the way the deck works. And Bowclair is a 6k unit, so that means you need at least 2 damage in either player damage zone to actually to make it work. And last but not least, and I feel the biggest problem with this deck, is the fact that the deck doesn't search often enough for Flam-G unit or has enough Flam-G unit to actually make the skill consistent.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
As of the recording, you only have total of 3 different Flam-G units that is actually worth to put in your deck, and that is the right line itself.
Stop it. Get some help.
None of their support actually has Flam-G in its name, and it actually kind of screw this deck up because when up against any control deck, this deck is screwed because you might not be able to have 3 different Flam-G units on the field, and that is where the problem lies. The deck playstyle is alright, but you gotta wonder, just like the Roya herself, where are all her friends on certain turns?
こうして後藤一人は灰となり、もう二度とギターを持つことはなかったのでした。
Fortunately enough, there are cards that does help you to both fetch more Flam-G ray cards and at the same time reuse those Flam-G ray cards that was retired either by their own effects or retired by opponent effects. As we're moving into the support of this deck, the first one that I do want to talk about is Dive to Blue Lucaris, the double R for the deck, and I have to say this is actually pretty disgusting. This unit triggers when your Flam-G Vanguard attacks can be both Roya or Bowclair. Counter plus 1, put a Flam-G unit from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck, draw a card, and all of your unit with Flam-G in their card's name get 5k until end of turn. This ability is actually really good, as not only it helps you to make sure that your deck will always have a Flam-G ray card for Roya to actually superior call on, but at the same time the fact that the skill attached to the player, unless you are playing against Blankmeyer, you don't need to worry about your skill being lost for the rest of this turn. And the fact that you can stack multiple of them in a single turn can be quite disgusting because you can spend 3 counter blasts for 3 of her to trigger at the same time. So yeah, that is
Genuinely disgusting.
And then we move on to the second card, which is Fly Up My Heart Person, who also has a similar condition, where when she plays on guard circle, put a Flam-G unit from drop zone to the bottom of your deck, and this unit get 10k until the end of battle. Any deck will always appreciate an additional 15k shield no matter what deck it is, unless you're playing against Chaos who has a guard restrict. And last but not least is overcoming numerous total failures, Amdusia. Amdusia has 2 skills where she can boost if your Vanguard is Flam-G, and secondly, when placed on Rare Guard Circle, you can look at top 3 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 Flam-G card from those 3, add it to your hand, and put the rest to the bottom of the deck in any order. This is the only way for the deck outside Roya to actually search for Flam-G Rare Card. I'm not saying this is terrible, but the fact that currently Roya and Amdusia is the only way for the deck to search for more Flam-G Rare Card can be a little bit painful for the deck in the long run if you are not lucky enough. So, what is the good point and the bad point of Roya? Well, this is a really tough one because there's not a lot of good point for this deck, as the best thing about this deck is a twin Vanguard attacks, just like the way MMe-G works. And the deck does have a way to deck thinning and at the same time cycle resource back. Is actually a positive because not a lot of decks do have them. But that is all the good part about this deck, and that because everything else about the deck is really problematic. As for one, you do need 3 different Flam-G Rare Card to trigger Roya restand skill. And secondly, the power gaining skill of Roya is heavily dependent on your opponent damage zone. So if your opponent heal at any timing, it might actually mess up your power level because of the fact that damage zone is usually very dynamic. And last but not least, the fact that you are relying on a certain starter to make things work does leave a clear weakness for a certain deck to actually target at. And that is Flam-G, a mistake of an experimentation of a recall right line that should have been very obvious to the development team that it just doesn't work unless the support is actually a Flam-G Rare Card or actually do something that actually help the deck better. I wouldn't see this deck being played at all. This is still better than Rotovisor, don't get me wrong.
I don't like where this is going.
But it is definitely need a lot of helps. But what do you guys think? Do leave down in the comments below as usual on what you guys think about this rock and really rolling of a right line. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, and this is Mac Megane signing out.